Low tide at Pillar Point, a scenic spot on California's coastal highway. It's a favorite spot, too, for biologist Gary Vermeij, when he's out searching for insights into one of nature's longest-running arms races. Gary searches, or as he puts it, sees, with his hands and fingers.
Oh, look at this. This is a Peysaster. Oh, wow, that is a big Peysaster. And he is actually, well, he's very tightly attached.
Blind since the age of 3. It's through touch that he sees things most of us with sight would miss.
What are you doing? Aha! What have you got there? It's like a tegula. Yes, indeed. Absolutely. He had a tegula. Tegula funebralis snail. And he had this snail sitting right like this, and his mouth was over the opening of the snail, and he was clearly digesting it. What they do is they have this stomach that they can extrude through the opening of the shell into the snail and digest it externally. It's kind of a slow, miserable way to go, but that's what they do. Right now, just do your thing here. Find another tegula.
It was no contest between the starfish and the snail. But Gary is fascinated by how mollusks like the snail have evolved defenses against their predators' weapons, leading him occasionally to confront those weapons himself.
Yeah, they have some pretty good-sized claws.
Mm-hmm.
I got a hold of this claw now. Be careful, you're right.
Tips. Yes. Yes.
Well, he's really struggling against me, too.
Yes, I'm afraid of getting bitten or something, but it doesn't happen very often. In any case, I think it's worth the effort because you always find something interesting.
To Gary, no shell is without interest, even one that's been almost entirely demolished.
Oh, Colosella asmi on this tegula. This is a lethally broken tegula funebralis. It has, I don't know who killed it or what killed it, but it could have been a crab, and it's been pretty badly mashed. Definitely a fatal wound.
But it's shells that have survived the attacks of their predators that Gary finds most intriguing, because in their scars, he sees their life stories.
I imagine a crab or something got at this shell, broke the lip back about 90 degrees. The animal survived and repaired the damage and is now back to normal. But this animal had a rather eventful life.
The daily skirmishes along the seashore that Gary reads in the shells he finds are the latest in a confrontation that's lasted hundreds of millions of years. Back in his office at the University of California in Davis, Gary uses his Braille typewriter to catalog the thousands of shells he's collected in field trips around the world. He keeps abreast of what's happening in evolutionary biology with Braille transcriptions of the journals, including the leading journal in the field, of which he is the editor. Gary Vermeij has never let his blindness stand in his way.
He must have a very, very strong upbringing.
I had an exceedingly strong upbringing. My parents were what I consider to be quintessentially level-headed Dutchmen who they never heard of failure. They never heard of giving up.
On our way to his office, we stopped at a sculpture garden.
Actually, this one looks a little like a crab claw. but the
now,
claws are up high here.
Yeah, now that part's nice and smooth. But you feel this? This is ugly.
Yeah.
It's
see,
rough.
I don't focus on that because
I know.
I'm
you
looking
see,
at the
when
whole shape.
people look at this and they don't have to feel it.
Yeah.
They had to feel it. They say, it's just a rock.
Yeah, see,
And of course now it's nice and warm because it's in the hot sun.
Yeah, well, that's right. That's something you get that you don't get if you're just looking
That's
at
right.
it.
You can't feel the cold stove.
Changes in temperature all
That's
on
right.
various sides of this.
That's right.
The idea that you may see things that we don't, like this texture and the temperature, things that I would never have thought of as part of the enjoyment of a sculpture is very interesting, because do you suppose you see things, therefore, in shells that other people don't see?
I'm not sure I see things that others don't see. I may emphasize some things more than other people would, but I think I essentially see the same things.
We began our tour of Gary's lab with a demonstration of what shells are up against. How strong are those claws?
Well, I'll show you here.
This is Ed Pearson, one of Gary's graduate students.
Here, grab onto my pencil here. And give it a little shaking.
She's really clamping down now. I can really see how she could break a shell with that strength.
I've ruined a few pencils this way, too. So.
The crab's claws made short work of the snail Ed gave it. But then I got to serve up a different tidbit.
Yoo-hoo! Lunch!
It was potentially as tasty, but in a trickier package. And this time, despite several minutes of probing for a weak spot, the crab gave up and the shell survived unscathed.
That is a pterodactyl.
Yes, it is.
Gary's passion is to learn how these survivors evolved.
Do your shells go back that far or further?
A couple of them. Most of the ones I work on are since the age of the dinosaurs. We go right here. Let me show you a Volema that has a truly horrid scar on it. Let's see if we can find it here.
His favorite fossils are survivors who lived to repair their battle wounds.
Here, yes, this is a really dreadful. It has sustained this attack right here, which isn't so bad, and back here when it was much younger. Look at this. This is terrible.
Oh, big crack like. Now this is all scarred. It's not a pretty shell, and yet this is valuable to you in your work, right?
You bet.
Much more than a pretty shell.
Yes. It tells you a lot. This is an animal that records, it chronicles its own history very nicely.
The history Gary sees chronicled in his fossil shells is of repaired damage becoming more frequent over evolutionary time, suggesting more shells are surviving the attacks of their predators as their armor becomes more sophisticated. Meanwhile, of course, their predators were evolving ever more fearsome shell-crushing weapons of their own.
This happens to be a box full of one set of stomach contents of a fish.
Now, how did this get broken? Did the fish chew on it first?
Yeah, the fish has a jaw.
Oh,
Here's
the jaw.
This is it. And of course, these are upper and lower, and they crush.
So they crush it between those two rough
like
plates.
a vice. And it goes just like
crunch.
But some shells came up with an ingenious solution.
If it has long spines, it makes the shell larger. For example, now this is a truly unusual example. Okay,
That's pretty spiny.
Yeah, it's pretty spiny. Well, these spines actually make the shell, in a way, bigger than it really is. And so it's harder to put into the jaws.
Because, I see. It's not as the spine. I thought the spine would act like a kind of a spear or a pike or something.
No,
but
it simply makes it
just,
bigger.
It's a bigger thing, but it doesn't have to grow so big. It just puts out little spikes.
That's right. That's right.
Spines aren't the only defense mollusks have evolved. Others grew longer, giving the soft animal inside room for retreat. Some shells evolved buttressing to strengthen the vulnerable opening, while others closed tightly. Or, like this cowrie, have a small opening and a slippery surface. All these adaptations are in response to predators that have also been evolving.
So for animals with skeletons like mollusks, the world has changed a lot. You have to meet higher standards than one might have had to meet hundreds of millions of years ago. You're not necessarily better off today, but it's kind of like human beings. We have to put up with heavier weaponry, with guns, whereas, in the 1200s or whatever, we only had to put up with arrows.
These caught my eye. These are incredibly beautiful here.
Oh, yes. They're wonderful fossils.
This incredible beauty was developed through an arms race, apparently, through conflict.
For every organism that lives, an awful lot have died and an awful lot have suffered.
Yeah, I think about the so-called balance of nature in a different way now that you say that, because I guess nature looks like it's in balance and everything seems
comfortable unless you happen to be one of the things getting pushed off the scale to bring it into balance.
That's right.
I mean,
We have to always remember that the world we're looking at is, for the most part, a world of survivors and the world of the successful.
And from that kind of surviving of conflict, you get these beautiful shells.
Yes.